What is going on, Governor Chisgule here, and today we're going to be talking about whether or not Saladin is a good investment in 2020. Is this commander worth your precious universal legendary commander sculptures, or should they go somewhere else? Stick around, because we're going to help you figure out whether or not this guy is worth the investment. Hello my friends, and welcome back. In this video we're going to be reviewing Saladin to talk about a couple of things. First of all, how 2020 and the changing meta has influenced Saladin's viability over time. Is it an investment that really holds its weight, or does it lose a lot of value? We're going to review then the skills, talents, how to unlock, and optimal pairings in the middle of 2020 when we're recording this video, so that you can make a better assessment as to whether or not this is a commander you yourself would invest in. Because, by the way, I do really think we've learned a lot about how to evaluate these skills over here and what talents we would choose, and his role has in fact changed over time. If you like Rise of Kingdoms guides that help you get value and smash your enemies, consider smashing the subscribe button for daily Rise of Kingdoms videos, and we are a sponsored content creator for Rise of Kingdoms. Let's jump right into what has changed in 2020. Because Saladin, as you know, is a commander that counters healing. That's something that happens on the first skill, reducing healing effectiveness of the target by 50% for 5 seconds. Now, we'll talk more about the skills in just a moment. However, what I want to call your attention to is the fact that there are new commanders that enter into the game that will be impacted by a healing reduction. Ramses is one such commander that will be in the field that does a lot of healing, and cutting that healing will be meaningful in reducing the effectiveness of Ramses on the battlefield. In addition, there is going to be a lot, and I mean a heck of a lot, of play at the ruins and altars involving Richard I. And although cavalry is countered by infantry, I will say that Saladin's healing debuff is just really savage to apply to Richard I. And for that reason, I do feel that Saladin holds some amount of weight into the future of Rise of Kingdoms, because not only is he very mobile on the battlefield, but he can reduce the healing of these commanders that rely critically on getting healing in order to survive. Now, the thing that has also changed, however, is that there are even more commanders than there were before that could interfere with healing. To give just a few examples, in addition to Saladin, we've of course got Alexander the Great. However, later on, we've got commanders like Ramses, which can cut healing entirely for 2 seconds. We had Guan Yu enter the game, and although he doesn't cut healing, he does silence the target, which makes it so they can heal less frequently. All in all, there is still a decent amount of healing into this game, and of course we've got to talk about Takeda, who does a massive amount of healing. So countering the healing that is happening even on a Takeda could be very, very powerful, either in the open field or, quite frankly, in a counter rally. So I would say for those reasons, Saladin does hold a lot of weight. The more prevalent healing becomes, the more prevalent or viable Saladin will be. With that said, in addition to Saladin, you've got other options now that you didn't have before. So while originally he was the only game in town, which made him extremely valuable, some of that value has degraded over time because there are more options and you've got more choices. And in general, I would recommend that between Saladin and Alexander the Great, the more important priority would be rocking Alexander the Great as an investment. So with all of that said, and the indication that Saladin really is still a very viable commander in 2020, card up in the top if you want to see the last time we put together a legendary tier list reviewing Saladin relative to all the other commanders. That'll be there for you so you can watch it at the end of the video. Let's talk now about Saladin's skills, because the way we view these is different than we did before, and we also need to reevaluate these to see if they still are a good value, good rate, like they were when this commander originally arrived into the game. So the first skill does a damage factor of 1,700 when expertised. It reduces the march speed of the target by 50% and the healing effectiveness by 50% for 5 seconds. Saladin really does make it very difficult for Richard I to escape combat, and let me tell you, at the Ruins and Altars of Darkness, that is astonishingly effective. I'll put a card up in the top for some of that fighting if you just want to see exactly what that would look like. Now, I'll call attention to the fact that some of the effectiveness of that first skill is in fact coming from the expertise on Saladin. His expertise boosted that damage factor by 300 points, so the actual base damage factor when maxed in the first skill is 1,400. The expertise skill also is giving 20% additional march speed reduction, so the base skill is 30%, and in addition, it is elevating the healing effect reduction by 10%, so the base is 40. So what you saw over here is with the expertise skill, it's doing that solid 1,750% march speed and 50% healing. Now, one thing that has always made Saladin very attractive as a commander is this second skill. 40% of stats and 5% march speed holds its weight. That's good. That has remained good. It's still quite phenomenal. When we compare to just some of the newer commanders that have come into the game, like, for instance, we'll get a look at Theodora. She's giving 10% bonus damage, and damage from rallied armies reduced by 10%. I know these commanders do two very different things, but 40% of stats is looking really good these days. Plus, there's the 5% march speed. I really think that second skill has always been very good and continues to be good. Now, we know that health is a more important stat than attack and defense. Card up in the top for a detailed evaluation of why that is the case. Again, you can watch that at the end of this video if you're interested. So I do think that this is very, very powerful. The next skill is also very powerful, but the reason we think this is powerful is different than we used to think. He reduces the skill damage taken by 30%, and he reduces counterattack damage taken by 20%. Now, reducing the skill damage you take is good anytime you're in a big brawl, like at the Ruins and Altars of Darkness, where, look, you're going to take area of effect damage that you didn't intend to take. You're going to take that damage from targets you're not hitting, but they're hitting you. So that is really effective in reducing the damage you're taking, even if the primary target you're fighting is not doing skill damage to you. In a similar vein, this next ability here, reducing the counterattack damage taken, is really good in a couple situations. It's good against targets that you're hitting that are not hitting you back. And it's also good if you are in a multi-rally context or in the open field. So this skill in particular is really good for multi-rallying a city, in addition to open field, because if you're multi-rallying a city, you're not taking normal attack damage, so there's no reduction of that here. You are taking counterattack damage, and 20% reduction is a big deal. And if the commanders that they have on their wall, if let's say it's Constantine and Charles Martel, are not doing skill damage, then this does nothing, but that makes the counterattack damage reduction even better. Or, if they are doing area of effect damage, like Isong, then you're covered with the skill damage taken reduction. I think this skill is very good, and it's definitely worth maxing these first three skills before you unlock the fourth skill, which is all about hitting cities. Now look, I don't think I've ever really used Saladin to hit cities. I thought I would. A part of the reason I invested in him is that I'd have a commander to go and do that. This is a part of where Saladin's value over time has, in my opinion, diminished for hitting cities in particular. Because look, Attila Takeda is just better for hitting cities. So if you wanted the best way to hit a city, it's Attila Takeda. The thing about Attila Takeda, however, is that Attila and Takeda must be taking the normal attack damage of the enemy. They must be the primary target of that city. Otherwise, you're losing about 40 to 45% of the damage that Attila Takeda do, which is in counterattack damage. So Saladin is still good for rallying a city in a multi-rally context. So if you have one Attila Takeda tanking the enemy, that's great. All subsequent rallies, if you're using cavalry, I do really like Saladin as a primary, and we will talk about some of those pairs. 15% additional damage is kind of a big deal. That's normal attack damage, counter attack damage if you are the primary target being hit by the enemy. That is skill damage. 15% extra damage is very meaningful, and it's unusual to find such a large amount of damage dealt to cities. Now, unfortunately, it is only cities, and it's not all garrisons. If this was all garrisons, I think Saladin would see a lot more play, and that's honestly a direction I would love to see for this commander and some of the other conquering commanders. Just to give an example, Although you can't get loot on Saladin, you're basically getting 5% extra damage than you would compared to some of these other commanders. Frederick the First is doing a 10% damage bonus on a skill. Saladin is giving 15, but it comes with a downside. You can't take loot. Let's go talk about the talent builds that I would recommend for this commander, because they have most certainly changed since we originally expertised this commander. Here is the open field build that I would recommend. And there are a couple variations that you can do on this, but let's talk briefly about this build. First and foremost, I do really like Rejuvenate. Look, you gotta get the rage generation capabilities of the support tree when the commander has that tree. They are astonishingly effective, and it makes Saladin a proper rage engine. Pairing this commander with anyone who cares about their active skill being fired off is going to be nuts, and we will talk about how relevant that is for this commander. I, of course, like mobility, or I guess hasty departure, on the way up that tree. It means that when you're in the Altar of Darkness or Ancient Ruins, you can run around really quickly from resource node to resource node and get a burst of speed to avoid combat, and that is very effective. I did take some additional skill damage reduction. In addition to going for Rallying Cry, if you are fighting in the open field, it's unusual to just stand there and fight for like 2 minutes until somebody wins. Usually, at least the way I play, it's in like short bursts of intense fighting, and the extra 15% damage during the first 10 seconds seems like it's worth it to me. In addition, I have gone in and taken Buckler Shield. This is not something I used to take in the past, and the reason that I'm really invested in Buckler Shield as a talent to take is that if you're hitting a target that is not hitting you back, for instance, if you are battling against a Richard and Charles, that then somebody brings that to the Altar of Darkness, and they're hitting somebody else, the only damage you're taking is counterattack damage, so reducing that by an additional 9% is amazing. That is amazing, and it gives a huge amount of sustain to this march if you're battling in that game mode. That's why I've gone with this particular build. The only downside here, and it is a meaningful downside, is that you are missing a little bit of extra rage generation. This is 9 rage a second, which, okay, so it's 90 rage every 10 seconds. It's not astonishing, but it is meaningful to get rage every single way that you can. I have forgone that here. If you think you're really not going to be taking skill damage, you could drop Loose Formation, pick up the extra rage over here, and if you wanted, I guess, a way to increase your march speed and be even more mobile on the battlefield, it would be reasonable to take the 3 points of defense over here and to drop them into Equestrian Excellence. Moving on to the next build, this one is oriented toward hitting cities. It's reducing the skill damage that you're taking, generating large amounts of rage, and honestly taking advantage of Tear of Blessing to say, hey look, if I'm all in on hitting cities, and this is really like the only thing I'm going to be doing, let's really try to reduce here the amount of dead troops we're going to have, and I think this build does that quite well. One other build that you could use is this one over here. This is if you're battling against a garrison that's a bit more skill damage oriented. I've taken Emblazoned Shield to reduce skill damage taken, as well as Emergency Protection to even further reduce the skill damage taken. This is especially valuable if you think your rally is getting swarmed. I also think that this is a really good build for hitting flags potentially, because there is a very high chance that you're going to get either swarmed or counter-rallied or both. I've also maintained Entrenched from the prior build because, man, 6% of effectiveness for 3 talent points is a really, really good rate. This increases your damage dealt and also reduces the damage that you take. It's a very solid build. I would recommend this highly if you're hitting garrisons, either in Ark of Osiris, which, like, by the way, this commander is very good for doing that and reducing the effectiveness of Richard I, especially right around when this commander comes into the game. I mean, I don't think you have Alexander the Great at that point. This is the only game in town, and he's very good for that activity. This is a great build to use in Ark of Osiris for sure. Now, I mentioned earlier the order I would invest in these skills. You do really want to max the first 3 skills before you start leveling up this commander. And because this commander has such amazing talent trees, I do think they make for a phenomenal primary commander. The downside is that it's going to take a lot of legendary commander sculptures in order to get the first 3 skills. It's a lot easier to get the first 2 skills than it is the first 3, and that is because the number of sculptures required really escalates over time as you get more and more skills applied onto the commander. So although, the first couple skills are going to be 10 and 15 legendary commander sculptures, by the time you're doing these last few skills, I think it's like 45, 45, 50, and 50, something like that. So we're talking about another 190 sculptures to get this one skill maxed out. But I really do feel that this skill is worth it. You could leave the skill at its base and go 5, 5, 1, 1, and then hope you get lucky if you apply more sculptures. But the reason I really struggle with that is that in this 4th skill, 99% of the time you don't want anything to land here. I just can't imagine wasting 45 legendary commander sculptures to have it land over here. It would just feel sort of heartbreaking. So my recommendation really is to max the first 3 skills before you proceed. That's a bigger investment than a lot of other commanders. However, given the direction of healing in Rise of Kingdoms recently, with the number of times you can be helped, I think it's better to have a smaller number of marches that are maxed out than to have lots of marches that are 5, 5, 1, 1. And in that regard, investing in Saladin and going all in on a commander is a sound strategy. Looking into the pairings is obviously one of my favorite things to do in Rise of Kingdoms. I want to call attention to a couple things here. First and foremost, the support tree doesn't care about skill damage. So unlike the skill tree, which really wants you to pair with commanders that do lots of skill damage, you really don't have to do that with Saladin. So looking into some of the pairings, Saladin and Double C is very, very popular. It gives you additional amounts of march speed. It gives you a lot of extra damage, and people kind of offset the defense reduction of Double C with the tankiness of Saladin. There's also some healing here, which is something that Saladin benefits from, and there are actually even talents that you might have chosen on Saladin that will give you a little bit of boost from healing. I like Minamoto as a pairing, although I feel it doesn't perform quite as well as Cao Cao does. I will say, however, that the debuff on Minamoto here is amazing. Increasing the damage taken of the target is very, very substantial, and if you can find a way to get Minamoto into the lineup for that extra damage boost, you will certainly get value. Continuing on, I love Khan as a pair. People often ask, should I invest in Saladin or should I invest in Khan? I'll say that Saladin is more tanky, Khan does more damage. Both play very different roles. Khan is a rage engine. Saladin also a rage engine, but more a utility player, reducing march speed and also healing of the target. With that said, if you're going all in on the damage plan, make Khan the primary. If you're going all in on the damage mitigation plan, make Saladin the primary, and that's based purely in their talents. Now, one pair you might not have expected is Alexander the Great. I know that sounds crazy, but look, Alexander the Great only has really one skill that cares about infantry. And yes, he cares about infantry a lot, but his other skills are so freaking good. I mean, look, the healing reduction of these two commanders, I'm pretty sure doesn't stack. I think the stronger effect would override, which means most of the time you're not even going to get the benefit of the healing reduction from Alexander the Great. However, I will say that you will do a ton of shielding. Your allies will love you for that. You will do a ton of debuffing because you're going to be generating outrageous amounts of rage from Saladin. And quite frankly, you're going to do a lot of damage. As I said, Saladin doesn't care about doing lots of skill damage, so having this second ability that does the damage and the first ability is just a shield, you could pair these two and you would be surprised at just how well they pair together. Continuing on our list, I would not pair together Attila and Saladin. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Attila is reducing the skill damage you deal, and while you will get a lot of tankiness from Attila, I feel like there's a lot of other places you should be using Attila in this game. You could, however, pair with Freddy for huge amounts of single target damage. You will do an astonishing amount of damage. Freddy always wanted a rage engine. Saladin delivers that rage engine. You can bring extra troops for battling in the open field, which is pretty reasonable, and there is some amount of sustain here, not much, but some. I really do feel you can crank out astonishing amounts of single target damage with these two as a pair. In a similar vein, if you wanted to make a very tanky march, Julius Caesar would be a surprising but effective pick. Julius Caesar increases attack, defense, and damage, and he doesn't care about skill damage, nor does Saladin. I like over here that you can dramatically reduce the damage that you're taking. I mean, if you wanted to make an extremely tanky open field march, the Julius Caesar pairing here is super real, and I would not underestimate it. In addition, I like Mehmed II as a pairing. He is going to elevate the skill damage dealt, and Saladin does do skill damage. Mehmed always wanted a rage engine, and that is delivered in Saladin. In addition, I like the area of effect damage for open field fighting, as well as the extra troop capacity. One pair that is talked about a whole heck of a lot is Takeda. Takeda is extremely valuable in giving the thing that Saladin really needed to be an ultimate tank, which is healing effectiveness and additional damage taken reduction from skills, normal attacks. I mean, even counterattack damage taken is reduced here. This pairing makes Saladin extremely tanky, the most tanky he can be. And although I thought I would like this more at the Ancient Ruins, I thought it was fine, but not as good as Attila and Takeda, to be perfectly honest. So I really didn't feel like I got quite as much value as I would have liked from the mobility on Saladin and the combination with Takeda. Theoretically, that is a phenomenal pair, but I felt like I could do better. With that said, rating some of the other things we talked about, I do think Takeda is a better pairing than Freddy and Caesar and some of those other folks. The sustain over here is super real. Saladin makes it so that you fire off that active skill very frequently. It's exactly what Takeda wants. It's a great combo, quite frankly. Looking further down the list, we can talk briefly about some epics. If you wanted some tankiness, AoE, and rage gen, Sun Tzu delivers it. Nothing wrong with this pair. It's great. The only thing I'll say is there's a lot of places you could use your Sun Tzu. So, and you've got a lot of cavalry choices you could pair with. For Saladin, I don't know. You could pair him. I think it would be fine, but I think that you probably want your Sun Tzu somewhere else. In terms of other cavalry commanders, I do really like Pelagius. There's a huge amount of rage gen here, a lot of stats, and also healing is very solid, given that Saladin is so tanky. I think this is a natural pair, it works well. Belisarius, also a solid pair. You're going to get a lot of utility here out of the attack reduction, defense reduction, very solid pairing. I also really like Baibars for area of effect damage. Look, Saladin delivers a rage engine. That rage engine is super real, and you know that I probably even overvalue that relative to other people. I think it's very powerful in doing area of effect damage, and you even get some march speed and healing when you leave combat, which you will leave combat a lot at the Ruins and Altars of Darkness. A Saladin Baibars combo will be quite effective in that capacity. Looking at some of these commanders that, however, don't care about a troop type, do not underestimate Osman. Osman, when paired with Saladin, will practically be legendary tier. He generates so much rage that you will be firing off Sword of Osman, an unbelievable amount, and that is 400 rage every time the active skill of the primary is used and the secondary is used. Osman does huge amounts of single target damage. Saladin does single target damage. I like the idea of using this as a march that is designed to isolate and focus down marches that are caught out of position. It's a great pair. In addition, I really like Joan of Arc as a pairing. I personally, in Season 4 of KVK, with my own murder ball, used Saladin with Joan of Arc in order to give the Joan of Arc buffs to my other marches in my murder ball. And yes, there were other people nearby that could give me those buffs, and most likely had brought Joan of Arc, but the buffs are so good. And we know that they stack, by the way. Card up in the top if you want to see exactly how that works. We've done a lot of myth busting recently for Joan of Arc, Alexander the Great, and others, so check those out at the end of this video if you're interested. Saladin Joan of Arc is a great pair. It's a great pair in Canyon. It's a great pair in the open field. If you are bringing other marches that do more damage, or you want to buff your allies. The tankiness and mobility of Saladin is exceptional for protecting the Joan of Arc. I really like that as a pair, so much so that, again, I personally use that in Season 4 of KVK, and I got a lot of options for commanders that I could be bringing to the battlefield. I also really like that pair, again, in Canyon, as a way to bring in Joan of Arc, protect her, but also as a way to cut the healing of a target like Richard I, and man, that is just so freaking effective. All in all, I think that Saladin has held his weight into 2020, but I will say that when I think about who do I want to use to do different things in Rise of Kingdoms, I do not find myself looking to Saladin as a commander that I want to go out of my way to pick. In the open field, I feel like things have trended toward infantry as much as possible. And I don't love using cavalry to battle into infantry because look, they're countered. All in all, I think this is a solid commander who will last a very long time for you in Rise of Kingdoms and will be a great investment. I do think, however, there are other commanders that are higher priority. I think that commanders like Esong are higher priority. I think that commanders like Alexander the Great are higher priority. And I suppose there is one pair I forgot to mention here, which is Esong himself. Gosh, Esong is just so good. I mean, can Esong be paired with someone? Yes, it's probably good. The Saladin Esong pair is no exception to that rule. They are phenomenal together. I wish the pair had a little more march speed, but the rage generation is insane. You'll bring all cavalry. You bring this to the Altar of Darkness or Ancient Ruins, and you're going to be doing ridiculous amounts of area effect damage. And Saladin is so good at taking area of effect damage that, like, you're not too worried about being in the middle of the fray with a Saladin Esong pairing. Whew. This commander has obviously got a lot of use, and for that reason, I think is solid for a low spender into the game. However, again, I really want to emphasize the priority of having an expertise Esong, having an expertise Alexander the Great, and that those will give you generally more mileage than you'll get from Saladin. Overall, because he is a commander that comes from the Mightiest Governor event, I do like this as a commander to invest your Universal Commander Sculptures because you're not going to be wasting them. There's no way to get more Saladin Sculptures without trying to get more Saladin Sculptures, and that's only during a short window for the Mightiest Governor. So I like this as a commander to use your Universals, and if you're looking for something to watch after this, I'll have one more recommendation for a video that talks about why your Universal Legendary Commander Sculptures should not be spent in commanders that you can get from gold keys until you're very close to expertising those commanders. Consider throwing a like on this video if you found it at all helpful, and I would appreciate your subscription if you're interested in more Rise of Kingdoms videos. We produce them daily to help you get value and smash your enemies. Until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.